Hello and welcome to the Double M Radio Gamescast. As always, I'm your host Ryan. Today I'm joined by my lovely cohort of co-hosts Brett,
Hello.
Wyatt,
I like it we start by dancing now because we can hear the song because it starts the day off in a good mood.
and Alex.
Hi, I don't have anything crazy to say.
Well, that's okay on a day
Yet.
like this.
Yeah.
Exactly what we predicted last week happened. So it's episode number 105. We were like,
now we're not saying we're geniuses. We're just heavily implying that we are.
yeah, and maybe a little bit of precognition goes in there, just a bit of black magic. So
a little bit.
we said, all right, we know the PlayStation Plus stuff is probably going to be announced this week, according to Bloomberg. So it's probably going to happen the day the podcast goes live, like an hour beforehand. That's exactly what happened. So we're going to talk about that this time. We're going to get that discussion done with first, because I don't know if it's bigger news, but I think news that has more things we can spiral a discussion off into. E3 is also canceled. Flat out this year. No digital E3, no event. So that's going to spiral us into a few different topics. But I think, first of all, let's get this discussion about PlayStation Plus and its new coming structure done with. Now, we had suggested a couple of things for PlayStation Plus. I think the obvious thing that everyone was hoping for in terms of not just us, but in general game audience, people were wanting Sony exclusive titles day one, right? Do the day one Game Pass thing. Not happening.
That was the one thing we said. Yeah.
Not happening.
All of the things that we thought they should do, they did almost none of them.
Now, I do want to clarify, this is a thing that Bloomberg did report and Jason Schreier reported 2 months ago. This was not going to happen. He was like, this is the PlayStation Plus thing is going to be maybe advertised as a competitor, but it is not functionally going to be a competitor to Game Pass. That's what happened. It is a similar price, which is maybe a little bit sketchy in some degrees.
Then it's not a competitor. It's just bad.
Your basic PlayStation Plus Essential is exactly what PlayStation Plus is now. So this is the normal PlayStation Plus tier, $10 a month, $60 for a year. This is like, it's a bad deal at $10 a month. At $60 a year, I think it's a lot more reasonable. It's about $5. Mm-hmm. So with that, it's fine. You're getting your 2 games a month. You're getting your discounts. You're getting your PlayStation Plus collection if you have a PS5. So you're still getting a lot of games and whatnot. It's just not providing the day one titles that you would want. Now, let's see what Sony has decided to do to bump the value of that up to $15 a month or $100 a year. So even if you're going yearly, this is an extra $40. All right. This adds a catalog of 400 of the most enjoyable PS4 and PS5 games.
Most enjoyable according to who?
Definitely Sony, and probably the people paying or that are cheap enough to be on the service. So, PS4 and PS5 games includes blockbuster hits from PlayStation Studios catalog and third-party partners. This is the tier you'd expect to have the day one games, right? This is your competing with Game Pass Ultimate now, right? Which is a pretty good deal, all things considered. Even just comparatively at $15 a month, you get so much with it. Then you have this. So we don't know what games are going to be in this. We have no indication of that. It says 400. That's a big number of games.
Not a good incentive to buy it.
Yeah. I mean, because how many games does Game Pass have on it right now? It's over 500, right? Are they at 1,000?
It's a sizable amount, but I think
wow.
I want to say the key thing with Game Pass is that when a Xbox first-party title is released, you expect it to be on Game Pass for the foreseeable future, right?
Yes.
It's essentially a guaranteed you have access to this game for as long as you are paying for your Game Pass subscription, which works the same way as PlayStation Plus does, right? Where as long as you are paying for your subscription, you have access to whatever games you have gotten through the two a month thing that they do.
Yeah.
So
I bring up that amount because I used to be a lot pickier. I'm a lot less picky with what games I want to play now, but even in Game Pass, like I look around and I just go, I don't really want to play any of these right now. I just I have the ones that I want from it, and I don't really want to. I'm just going to wait for this new one to come that's supposed to come in the middle of the month. I don't know. And they have a substantial number larger of games than what Sony is planning, because I mean Game Pass also has EA Play and all of those EA games added in. Also, before we get to any of the other tiers, I know Game Pass also has like a couple months of like Spotify Premium.
Yeah, if you have Game Pass Ultimate,
kind
you
of stuff.
get like 3 months of various subscription services, just kind of randomly. They'll just toss them out.
They don't
Like
do
that-
that with the Sony one, do
Oh
they?
God,
They
no!
don't
Of
say
course
that.
they wouldn't.
of course
They're
not.
too self-absorbed.
It's also,
Well-
I do have to wonder how often they get used, though. That is one of the benefits that I think probably doesn't affect a lot of people.
Hey, I use the Hulu Disney Plus thingy, not ESPN, because I'm not a sport boy, but the other two
Yeah.
came in handy.
And here's the thing too, right? Because I'm experiencing a similar thing to Brett, where there's a lot of games on Game Pass, but obviously not every single one of those games is something that I necessarily want to play. But there's going to be plenty of people that either already own Game Pass or may own Game Pass at some point in the future that will want to play those games that I'm not really interested in. Like with that many games at this point, they're covering all their bases in terms of like genres and that
Especially
sort of
with
thing. So
indies and
they
whatnot,
have
right?
a
Because Game Pass
Oh, yeah,
has
it's
so
a-
many
Yeah.
indies.
Oh, it's the indie haven.
It's a great place for that. And you know, it definitely seems like PlayStation wants something a bit more curated, a bit more specific, but I feel like if this is their answer to Game Pass or something like
yeah,
their own
if you're going
version of
curated
that,
and specific, you gotta have those first-party titles there. And
You definitely
nothing
Not just
in
say
this,
400 games.
Yeah, nothing in this leads me to believe that. So I do wonder how much of this is them gauging interest and like gauging public reception, because they haven't committed to a lot of things with this, right? They haven't directly said it's going to be for day one. They haven't directly said it's not going to be day one. I doubt it will be. I think the plan as of now is absolutely to not do that. But I think there's a small chance some ideas change based on the public perception of this. It's just the kind of thing where I don't know if they're going to push that hard for people to get the extra $5 a month for this, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know if that's a big enough amount of money for them to really consider putting these titles day one, especially when like you've already got to own a PlayStation console. What else are you going to own it for if not to play those PS exclusive titles, right? So
it also the other thing that this shows me too is that I don't know why Sony is banking so hard on PlayStation Now when it just feels like it's a service that it's not what people want, right? Like PS3
well, it is what people
titles,
want, but it's streaming.
That's what I'm saying, is that people want something that isn't streaming.
Yep.
Like I don't understand why they're putting so many eggs in this PS Now basket when I don't know a whole lot of people.
Oh, importantly,
either
the PlayStation Plus
or-
Extra doesn't include PS Now. You don't get those with this.
No.
You just get this 400 catalog of titles that nobody knows, and we have no indication of if it's going to be worth it or not. And let me tell you right now, I think we're going to see a lot of Persona 5 is going to be on this list instead of Persona 5 Royal. Right? We're going to get things that are the inferior
Stop giving them
version.
ideas.
They already did that, right? That Persona 5 is in the PlayStation collection. Persona 5 Royal, which is the better game in every way, is not, because presumably they wanted to sell copies of it. So I get confused with this, where I'm just like, I don't see the value here until we get hard numbers on what this is, and especially how many titles are going to be like added from it, and if things are going to get removed repeatedly. Because with Game Pass, it's less of a hard pill to swallow, because generally things are on it for like a year minimum, right?
Yeah.
You generally have a good amount of time to play something that interests you. With this, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
And the reason that PS Now confuses me so much is that another thing that we were thinking, like, if they're doing this like Game Pass service, the thing they need is PS3 titles, not streamed. We want it downloaded on our consoles, ready to play.
It's not even
right?
necessarily just PS3, right? If I could at least download a lot of the PS2 and PS1 titles that you know are already emulatable very easily. I would at least be less unsatisfied than I am right now, right?
Yeah.
But instead, we don't get any of that. So moving up to
Not a bit.
PlayStation Plus Premium. This is the big ticket item. $18 a month, so $3 increase over the last tier. You get 340 additional games, which are PS3 games via cloud streaming. Oh, okay, I'm going to eat some of my words here, because catalog of beloved classic games available both in streaming and download options. So, sounds like PS2,
But not
PS1, and
PS3.
PSP games are possibly downloadable. Streaming is only the PS3 games, but man, I want to
Why?
play Metal Gear and have it play well. That's not gonna happen.
I
No.
can run Metal Gear Solid 4 and Demon Souls PS3 on my laptop, probably. And the PS5 is more powerful than my laptop. There is no excuse that a multi-billion-dollar company could not figure out a way to make that work. And it's kind of weird that they didn't even say that it's like coming. Like they're not even trying.
Yeah.
Like if this is testing the waters, this is like it's like barely even testing the waters. Like yeah, obviously people want to play the PS3 games.
Pooping in the
I-
hot tub
And
and,
this is
then
also
asking
essentially the
someone to get
tier
in it.
that includes everything in PlayStation Now, as of right now, as well as anyone that has PlayStation Now when this service launches will get this tier with whatever time they have remaining. So this is the kind of transfer service from PlayStation Now. Still, I mean, this is really a question of, is the cloud streaming good enough? Because I will give them the benefit where PlayStation cloud streaming, from what I've used of it, has worked better for me than any of the other cloud streaming options when I'm using like a PlayStation console. Because I would play a lot of PS4 games on my Vita from cloud streaming. That was a thing I used to be able to do, and it worked relatively well. Well enough that I could play most games I wanted to by doing that. So I wonder if it's going to work well, because I think a lot of that is just the low capacity of users for it, just making it easier to handle.
I remember I was trying to figure out how to do that with my Uncharted games a while back, and I could never figure out how to get it to work.
Oh yeah, with the
The
Vita, it's
Vita.
just you just hit a button and it like
And
What
launches
Vita?
your PS4.
Where are the Vita games? They're
Where are
nowhere.
the Vita games?
They don't mention them at all.
They don't exist. What Vita?
So
Sony
we never had that
dropped the
console.
Vita so hard. It's
I know.
so
I
sad.
have to wonder if the lack
Dropped
of
it like
Vita
a baby.
support here is mostly just them not knowing what to do. Because I have to assume a lot of Vita games probably have weird licensing, because it was primarily Japanese games that were on that system, and primarily games that were like music related or something. So I imagine a lot of things have probably had licensing issues. Persona 4 Golden now, you can get that on PC infinitely better than streaming it onto your Vita. So
And-
I wonder.
And the other
Uh,
thing too is like it's good to hear that it seems like PS Now seems to be like a streaming service that, like you said, works relatively well. But there's always that issue
It's still a streaming
of
service.
cloud streaming. It's still a streaming service, which means it's really restricted on your internet access and where you live. So there's still going to be plenty, even if it's a service that like, okay, maybe input lag is like to a minimum for this sort of thing, you know, the game still looks good even if you're streaming. It doesn't matter, because there's still going to be so many people where it's just they're not going to be able to take advantage of that. And you know, it's just weird that they're putting so many eggs in that basket when it comes to PS3 games, and I just think it's the wrong move here.
Just a rough
You're-
call.
Your musical game comment reminded me that I want a new Rhythm Heaven for the Switch,
Oh, we all do.
or even just a port over.
Yeah. And not to forget, the best part about this tier of PlayStation Plus Premium, you can get time-limited game trials that are going to be offered in this tier.
What?
Try select games before you buy.
You know, like that free thing that everywhere else has, the thing that you could do for free depending on the game.
You know, like a demo.
Ooh,
Like a demo.
Hey,
ooh,
pay extra for that.
shiny.
This is the same. See, at least with EA Play, right? The game trial thing is a like tertiary benefit, right? that actually gets some use, because that you get enough stuff on the basic thing of EA Play that you don't need this.
And let's not even mention, there's when you're looking through like the Nintendo eShop, there's literally a filter where you can look at just games that have demos attached to them, and it's a giant list of games where it's like, oh,
It's like
this
near
looks
every
cool.
first-party Nintendo game has a demo.
Yeah,
I just played the Kirby demo; it was great. So I just gotta wonder what the benefit of doing this is, right? I think it's just meant to be this little tempting thing of, oh, maybe you don't know that next God of War is gonna be good, do you? Of course we know it's gonna be good. I don't need to play a couple hours of that game to know it's gonna be good. This is a worthless thing added onto this.
That's for the people who go like, oh, I don't know. I don't want to play this game. They reuse the boat entering animation. It's ruined.
Where they get you with the psychological trick they're playing here, right? Is that you're gonna go, oh, I'm already paying $10, $15 for this other version. Why don't I just pay the extra $3 to get this tier? Because you're no longer looking at it as an $18 tier of things. You're looking at it as, oh, it's $3 on top of what I have. Still not good.
No.
Still not worth it. So I have to wonder how this is going to do. I think it's going to do plenty well, just because I think a lot of people just don't have this amount of money, doesn't make enough difference to them to where they're going to be like, oh, I can't afford to do this, right? I think there will be people who don't, but I think a lot of those people probably aren't paying for PlayStation Plus already. And so Sony's not losing anything, right? So I wonder how this is going to look. It's weird. It's hard to compare these because they're not directly competing with Game Pass in the way that we expected them to, or not necessarily expected, but wanted them to. So I wonder how this works out in the long run.
The other thing too, like, let's cast Game Pass aside for a second. It's a shadow that looms large over this entire thing, right? But let's put it aside for a second. Let's say Game Pass isn't a thing, and then this still happens, right? It's still not like impressive. It's still not anything that's going to grab anyone's attention, even if Game Pass wasn't a thing, because it's kind of adding features that are just like, that just elicit kind of a shrug from most people.
Yeah.
Like, even if there was no Game Pass, it would still just be as unimpressive, I think.
And to me, they almost have like the
Being from our
value of
live
these
reaction.
tiers inverted, right? To where I think if you wanted people to pay more money for this, swap the premium and extra tiers and have the extra tier have the older games, because that's the kind of thing that like people like Brett and I probably would jump for, right? If they had a good list of titles there, we're like, I love PS2 games. I will happily pay $5 a month to play some PS2 games, right? I don't want to pay $8 a month for it.
No. And it's also, I don't, in a perfect world, in a world with a possibly green and gray background, I don't have to pay a subscription to play the older games. I can put in my disc that I own for Call of Duty World at War into the thing, and it'll come up on the screen. And I don't have to pay $5 at GameStop.
I can put in my disc for Cameo, back from the rare days, and it plays.
Man. Even let's go back even
wonderful.
further. I can put in my disc for Final Fantasy VII into the PS2, and it'll play, and there wasn't an opportunity to buy
Brett,
anything extra.
I've still got a fat PS3. I can just put anything into that, and it'll run. That's a launch PS3 that's still working. Why do I need this? What is this for?
You mean you didn't?
Who is this?
You don't have to pay a subscription for servers that in 40 years might not be around anymore, and you'll lose the ability to play those games forever?
40 years they will not be around anymore. I do not give them that amount of time.
You're giving a lot of leeway, Brett.
That's a lot of leeway.
I said they wouldn't be around. I said they wouldn't be around.
Yeah, this is just such a strange bundle of things, right? This feels like a Nintendo move, in all honesty. This reads like the Nintendo Switch expansion pack to me.
Yeah.
Where it's just a bunch of extraneous things, right?
In light of recent actions, this feels more like a Konami move.
I wouldn't put it that low. That's too low. They're not trying to
no
make a
pachinko
pachinko machine
attached.
out of Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
They're still making quality games at the end of the day.
They
Yeah.
are. Yeah. Konami is not making anything.
'Cause I think functionally, what the effect this is going to have is
Pull out
it's
of
just going
itself.
to do nothing, right? Most people are just going to stay on the same tier they have, and
Mhm.
because it's not giving you the day one benefit. I think the negative person in me goes, okay, well, if they're not putting them on day one, but they are putting them on like 6 months after, well, I'm just not going to buy any Sony titles day one anymore. So at that point, they're hurting themselves. So what is the idea here is, I think, the real question, and we'll see. This is scheduled to launch in June, so I think by then we'll have a better idea of what this actually looks like, and likely a list of games that are in these tiers.
I hope.
You would hope so.
Be weird.
I mean, we definitely will by the time these launch, right? So it's just a question mark of if it's worth it to you, right? I think if you have a lot of disposable income, this is not a big issue. But for a general gamer audience, right, this is the kind of thing where if you're looking at getting a PlayStation console or getting a Xbox is a much better value proposition right now, right? Because you can get an Xbox Series S and Game Pass, and you're set. You got plenty of games to play basically forever. So
We're at a point in time now where, unless you're someone like me that's really attached to those Sony properties, there's kind of no reason to get a PS5, because you can buy into this Microsoft Xbox ecosystem and get way more out of it in the long run.
unless you're like me and really like triggers that click. I see that like
Listen,
a joke.
you're giving up a lot. You're giving up a lot for.
I like that DualSense controller.
My point. My point
Pressure
still stands.
differential.
I feel like if you're not attached to those Sony properties, there's really no reason to get a PS5 over investing in the Xbox ecosystem. I think that's just how it is now. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, again, they make good exclusives, and if you're like me, you're really into those. It's a great
That's kind of how Sony has always treated themselves, right? Is it they're more of a exclusives developer at this point than necessarily a hardware company, I think, because their hardware sells well because of the fact that they have good software. It's very Nintendo in that they're selling it based on the titles that they have. So,
which is not to say that they have bad hardware. It's just it's there to make sure that
the selling point of the hardware is you can play the Sony games on it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the selling point of the Xbox is, I can play all of these Game Pass games on it.
And I can play with all my buddies that are part of the PC Master Race.
Yeah. All right. So there's a couple other minor news things that happened this week I want to touch on, specifically one that has made headlines today. Because this, to me, is just a confusing thing for Games Radar to write an article on. Tales of Arise, dev, says there are no plans for direct sequel. It doesn't list the developer in the title, which is Bandai Namco. This is very reminiscent of another story that went out this week of a Elden Ring producer is in talks with Brandon Sanderson, who's another fantasy author like George R.R. Martin. Just call them Bandai Namco. Am I crazy? They're a big name in games, right? You don't need to go Elden Ring's producer. I don't know. It's a weird thing. But the reason I wanted to call out this article specifically, Tales games don't generally get sequels.
If they do, people usually don't like them at all.
If they do, they're usually bad.
Yeah.
And what really surprised me with this is I checked my newsfeed this morning, and this is like the top of everything.
What?
Why?
I thought nobody cared when that game even came out.
I think that's your select news bubble, right?
That's so weird.
Look, I might be, but I gotta bring it up. Why is this the top of everything today? After we just had E3 get canceled, it's just a very confusing thing to me that this is what has been plastered everywhere over the last 2 days.
I wonder if Arise just brought in like enough new people that didn't know that that's just usually how the entire rest of the franchise works, and they're just like, "Oh, what do you mean? There's not more? I can't just jump in anywhere."
Play Arise 2? Arise 2 Arisen more?
Rise to greater things.
All right.
Stupid.
Now, there is some more disappointing news this week. Scott Benny, the original Fallout
Benet?
writer. Scott Benny, I think it's pronounced. That could be totally wrong though. He's one of the original Fallout writers. The person responsible for naming Dogmeat passed away recently. It's a shame. The creator of Coffee Talk also passed away very recently, which is an excellent little indie game. It's been a rough week for some game developers. So, a lot of love out to those people. All right.
Yeah.
We got some good news, though.
Oh.
Capcom.
E3's canceled. No.
I mean, depending on your perspective, E3 canceled is good news.
We'll get to that.
Capcom has raised all employee salaries by 30%.
Nice.
We're getting that
Excellent.
bump. This is following in the wake of Bandai Namco doing the raises for everyone at FromSoft based on Elden Ring's performance. So, getting some nice improvements in terms of payment because, especially in Japan, devs are often very underpaid. So, good to see Capcom's doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to start
Hopefully
with that.
Hopefully it becomes a wider industry trend, but
Yes,
I guess
so-
I wanted to
we'll
lead
see
with
what
that because the next bit of news I think is very disappointing for everyone.
Oh no.
Oh.
A simple YouTube video released on Nintendo's channel this week titled Launch Timing Update for the sequel to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. It's a delay. Breath of the Wild 2 is delayed till 2023. Early 2023 from the looks. Of course, we didn't necessarily have confirmation it was coming in 2022. We had like there will be more information in 2022, but I do not believe we had an actual date.
There was more information in 2022.
More information. It's getting delayed. We did get some cool tidbits here about some little teasers for what else to expect in the game. You saw like there's a destroyed Master Sword that's all corrupted. It looked really cool. Some fun stuff in this trailer, but it's only a few seconds of new footage. They did say this is an ambitious sequel that we're getting.
What did Link do with the Master Sword that got it all screwed up?
He dropped it.
He dropped it and it just broke.
He got some goo on it.
Breath of the Wild weapons, they break so easily.
They finally gave the Master Sword durability. Oh no!
So when this announcement came out, I think I posed a question in our general chat. I asked, how many delays can a game get before you become concerned?
How many did Cyberpunk get?
About that amount, minus like 2.
Around that amount. I think it's a good number. I think the real answer is around the amount that Breath of the Wild got delayed. Breath of the Wild was delayed for like 10 years almost. It was
really?
Yeah, it was announced in like 20. I want to say around like 2012 as like a Wii U exclusive thing.
That's insane. I had no idea it was that.
And then it came out, and it, you know.
Wait, what year did
Breath of the Wild?
Wait, what year did Breath of the Wild come out?
2017.
2017.
So not super long, but a long enough to like 6-year development cycle for a Zelda game is unusual. So we're following pace with that because it's going to be 6 years in 2023 from Breath of the Wild 1. So yeah, we're following pace. Hopefully it comes out and is okay. I doubt they're gonna mess it up fantastically because Nintendo is typically on point with these things. So let's hope they are.
They very rarely come out with games in like a Cyberpunk type of situation where it's clearly unfinished and buggy. That rarely, I feel like, happens with Nintendo games. So
yeah, it's not a usual occurrence. Time for the big boy piece of news. E3 Digital 2022 is canceled. ESA is not going to be doing any E3 events this year. It had already been in, I believe, January, confirmed that it was going to be a digital event. Now it's nothing. There is no E3. I want to get immediate reactions to this from everyone. What is you hear this headline, what is the first couple of things that run through your head with E3 being canceled?
I understand that E3 can be filled with lies. It can be very goofy and uncomfortable sometimes. But god damn it, E3 is so much fun, and the one time it wasn't there, I really missed it, and I was so glad to see it back last year. And I think it's a sad thing overall, because it's a time for people to just be excited. And I think there's a lot of like giddiness. It's almost like Christmas. It's like you're running down to the Christmas tree, Christmas morning, and that's the feeling you get. And I am sad that it's gone.
Oh, I have a very different opinion.
That's a very different opinion.
I think
Mine was just
that's
like,
why we're doing this as a topic.
just a mental shrug, and I'll get my gaming information and updates and news elsewhere.
All right, valid thought to have.
It never really left a big impression on me, though. I never went to the physical thing.
It's like when you're writing, you're filling out spaces on like an official document or something, and all you have is a pen, and it's like, oh, I messed up, I wrote in the wrong spot, or I have a pen, can I just have a new document? And then you really don't feel anything that you have to just write on a different document. It's just give it like literally like 2 weeks away from where E3 would have taken place. We're gonna get like the Future Games Show or the PC Games Show, and it's gonna literally be the same amount of information at a later date than usual.
So Brett,
I think.
oh, go ahead, Alex.
In the article that I saw, I think they said that the team, there at least someone who they interviewed said that the team was working on getting it back to a physical
Yeah. So
thing next. Like it was all hands on deck
Yeah.
for the replanning of the physical event. But
the important thing is to take that with a grain of salt because the ESA is
don't care that
notoriously
much.
very flaky. So we don't know if E3 is coming back. There's the way they have framed this announcement is that they plan to come back next year. I think the real proof here is going to be how does summer go without E3, right?
Probably fine.
Smoothly.
So my main thought on this, and this is why I'm in between Brett and Wyatt, right? Because I think if Brett is correct and we get a new document, we get a new piece of paper with Jeff Keighley's name on it that says Summer Game Fest, 1 week long event. We've tried to schedule as many press conferences, and it's just E3 2.0. I'm in for that. That to me is more exciting because it's run by a less corporate entity, I think.
Mhm.
But I think from the year that E3 was fully canceled at the start of the pandemic and just basically didn't happen at all, there was a digital event that was just really bad. We had a major lack of anything in that summer, and it just felt really disappointing to have that week that would normally be a concentrated week of interesting announcements, cool things, studios showing off all these neat ideas that they've been playing with. And that to me is what I will miss if E3 does not come back next year, if there's not a event to replace it this year, is really just the condensing of everything. Because I think regardless, we're still going to get quote unquote Nintendo Directs from every company under the sun that wants to do one, right? We're missing the stage presence. We're missing the bombasticness, the crazy. I want to see Just Cause have a 5-minute dance routine at the start of a conference that I'm going to rate poorly afterwards because to me, that is fun. It's a fun.
You mean Just Dance? Never mind. It doesn't matter. Everyone knew what you're talking about.
Just Dance. You know Just Dance? Every Ubisoft conference they do has a 5-minute Just Dance routine.
No, I know. You said just. It doesn't matter. You said
Just Cause.
that must have been some weird. Look, if Just
Oh, I didn't
Cause has a
catch that.
5-minute dance routine,
I'm
instantly
down.
far more interested.
I'm down.
That to me, okay, now I'm gonna be disappointed if Just Cause 5 is not revealed with a dance party.
Oh, we missed out on a giant, massive opportunity. Dying Light 2, Stay Groovin'.
That'd be pretty good. Yeah, I just think it's gonna be we're gonna have that empty feeling of the summer where I think a lot of companies are just gonna kind of fade into the background and we're not gonna hear anything for multiple years at a time. And I'm just gonna be like, what are you doing? What's going on?
We're working. Leave us alone.
I honestly, you say that as a joke, but I think honestly, we're working. Leave us alone. This is probably, I don't know if we were planning a segue this soon, but this could possibly segue into what else we were talking about. But with overhyping games and stuff, one of the huge parts about that is these devs. They don't shut up. let's just keep it a secret until it's ready to come out in like a couple months or something. I don't want to hear about it like 20 years in advance.
If
Don't
only
tell me
CD
Final Fantasy Versus 13 exists and then 25,000 years later 15 comes out with the very like little molecules of what that game is supposed to be. Like, no, just shut up. I don't care. Tell me about it when it's ready.
If only
I wonder if that's a part of
CDPR
it.
actually stuck to the coming when it's ready tagline.
Oh, yeah, that worked out real well.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting thing with hype in video games because we've talked before. Brett has absorbed me into the world of pro wrestling. And I honestly think there's a weird number of similarities between pro wrestling and game reveals and hype.
Yeah.
Because you have this habit of sometimes a game is going to get announced, a wrestler is going to show up, it looks really cool at the start, and then they do nothing for a year, and you're like, oh, I don't care about you anymore. It happens plenty of times. I'm okay with that, for the most part. I'm alright with that happening. But I would like to know, especially I think in the case of indies, where fundraising and hiring is important, even if the project is going to fail. Like, I want to see the weird Pinocchio-themed Souls-like Lies of P, or whatever it was called. I want to see that trailer come out. Yeah, this is a real thing. Go look up the Lies of P.
Yeah.
Lies of P, just the letter P?
Yeah, the Lies of P.
Yes.
It is a cinematic trailer
a bad name.
about a Pinocchio Souls-like. And I want that.
I'm gonna miss the God of War reveal, which is probably one of the greatest video game reveals I have ever seen. It has everything. It has a surprise reveal that caught everyone off guard. It had gameplay that was actually accurate to the game and like sequences that were actually from the game itself and not just fake, BS. It was amazing. And I miss a lot of Sony stuff because they have these these awesome orchestras to like transition you to whatever game they're talking about. Yep. They would really theme their presentations and stuff like that. It was these gorgeous sets.
And now they don't do them.
I think above all else, I'm gonna miss the pageantry. Yeah. That's what I'm gonna miss. Because even if E3 it a lot of the times again it's maybe releases like things are announced too early, that sort of thing. There is this sort of like performance aspect, this pageantry to it that we're just not gonna get from other shows at this point. Yeah. And I'm gonna miss that a lot because I love a showman. If you give me a good time, even if the game announcements aren't that fun, if you can give me a good show, I'm totally fine with that.
It's like I know personally, I found out about a ton of cool games that I never would have had my eye on because of E3. Like there was a Generation Echo or something. Echo Generation might have been called. That was the pixel art game that was shown off at ID at Xbox. Like all sorts of crazy games that I would never have thought of are things that I end up watching because I'm down to watch an E3 conference. That's like a hour and a half of games news being thrown at me. And I'm like, okay, not all of this is going to be great, but there's going to be one or two important things here, and I'll probably learn some cool stuff. And I think the lack of that is going to be the real killer here. Because I think if they are spread out over the course of a couple of months, what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot less interest. These events are going to stop serving their purpose as advertising and investing events, and then they will stop existing altogether. That's my sort of pessimistic view of the route that we go without a centralized summer of games kind of event, is that we're just going to stop having these things. And then games are going to come out, and I think it's going to end up in a decline in people playing them because people don't know about them. So
And I'm going to say this too, because I actually have some experience with going to an actual E3 before. I believe I went in 2017. I wasn't there for the big press conferences and stuff because those are obviously only available for press. So I watched those with my friends, when I was at the hotel in California. But then I went there and it was so cool at the time because I just started college, right? And it was so cool to be that close to an industry that I never thought I would ever be that close to, right? It was such again, there was pageantry to it. There were giant statues of demons from Doom. There was this whole set for Fallout 76. This was before the game came out, so I guess people were still excited for it. But like there was this whole set of like inside a vault, and there was a bunch of people dressed up, and they were all like in character, and they were like, "Oh, how was your day?" And they were all in character. It was so cool, and I tried this like VR Gatling gun and just all this cool stuff, and I just again that's something I'm gonna miss because I always wanted to go back for another like on the showroom floor
I
E3
mean,
experience.
I
and
will
I'm never
add
gonna get
the
that.
showroom floor stuff is still going to exist in the form of like PAX and other events because those are always very similar. E3 was just a kind of a bigger version of a lot of those, but you can do a lot of the stuff you just described at a PAX event that happens across the country. So those types of things will still exist, especially because E3 is, as much as they attempted to be a consumer press conference, has never been a consumer press conference and never really succeeded at trying to do that very much. I just think, if thinking back to when Final Fantasy VII Remake was announced, the very first E3 they showed off that trailer, the level of just like sheer surprise across an entire room full of people, to me, is comparative to the level of surprise when like CM Punk debuts on Rampage. You look and you see, oh, this super important individual that no one ever thought would come back is here. This crazy game that shaped an entire like generation of people that play video games is coming back in this new form. And I think having a no audience for that, and this wouldn't have happened this year anyway because it's a digital event, right? But I challenge anyone to go watch the Game Trailers GT Kyle Bosman reacting to the E3 where they announced World of Final Fantasy, the little chibi Pokemon Final Fantasy game, and then 5 minutes afterwards announce back-to-back Final Fantasy VII Remake and Shenmue 3. The sheer reaction of that is just something that I think will bring joy to anyone, even if Shenmue 3 is not a good game. No.
Well, you want a closer comparison to the kind of experience you get with wrestling. Keanu Reeves during the Xbox event for Cyberpunk. Listen, Cyberpunk
Doesn't
came
matter
out,
if
huge
Cyberpunk's
disaster.
good or bad.
That was one of the coolest moments in any E3 like event ever. I think
you could say it was breathtaking.
It was breathtaking.
It was a great moment. And every time Cyberpunk showed up, because it would come out of nowhere, it would like hack the event or whatever, and there was these cool like out of nowhere reveals of gameplay or whatever. It was so cool, man. It was so much fun.
See, I'm the total opposite because I have just like any time that they bring in like the celebrity, it's like, you never played a video game in your life. What the hell are you doing here? Even if you're in the game or whatever, like, okay, that's cool, but
Keanu
leave.
Reeves said that he hasn't played Cyberpunk.
That's why I
he
enjoy
said he
it
never played
so
it after
much.
saying he had played it.
I just love the
Well, I think CDPR said he
insanity
played it,
upside
but he-
down world that happens when Keanu Reeves comes out and goes Cyberpunk in front of a room full of people.
I gotta tell you about something.
To me, that's like the funniest thing I've ever seen. It doesn't tell me anything about the game, and I don't care that I don't know anything about the game because it's an entertaining 5-minute sequence of things happening that I would not have seen anywhere else. Because I think, given the opportunity, execs at a lot of these companies, the people that are the pencil pushers and not the people developing the games, don't really care about the pageantry. They just care about numbers, right? They're the people. Their job is to care about the numbers. And the numbers go up if you don't spend money on a press conference. But I think alternatively, you're going to see a decline in interest after that. So I think it's a short-sighted thing if we don't have any replacement for these.
One of the other things that I've been thinking over is we were talking about the Keanu Reeves moment. I'm perfectly willing to give up another eventer happening of that magnitude if it means no more Cosby booths.
Yeah. I do think it's the question of like the E3 show floor and the E3 press conferences are separate things for the most part. And so when you're thinking of like, at least when I think of E3, and I think when most people think of E3, the actual convention itself isn't really what comes to mind unless you've been there like Wyatt has. I don't think it's a really important factor of it because for the vast majority of people, it is an unachievable thing to visit.
I haven't, but in my mind, they still exist together. You wouldn't have one without the other.
Well, I mean, we did for years. We had just E3, the press conference, right? It's not a consumer
E3
event.
E3 was not a consumer event. It started off not being one, and then it was, and then it wasn't, and then it was again.
Yeah, because people expressed interest in going to it that weren't journalists, so they were like, "All right, well, we'll make this more of a open event to people." Realized that was a massive undertaking that cost them a lot of money and didn't really return anything, so they stopped doing that, and they were like, "Oh, we'll do it again anyway." And so they waffled back and forth on that a bit, but I do think the essence of E3 is not the convention itself; it's the press coverage that comes out of it, right? That's the interesting part, and we still will get that without E3, right? We'll get that, but it'll be spread out over the year. I think that lack of centralization is going to lead to a lot of people losing interest and a lot of announcements getting lost in the bit. Because I don't care about indie game number 23 if it's just a trailer that drops on YouTube. I care about indie game number 23 when it's a sizzle reel in the middle of the Microsoft E3 press conference, and I'm like, oh, that like 2 frames I saw looked really cool. I'm gonna go look that up.
I would not have had as much interest in Tunic if it hadn't been announced, because I believe it was announced during E3 and it had a whole section for it at like
it was announced at E3 like 6 years ago.
Yeah, and it had that game like front and center. It was like one of the first things they showed off too, which was great. And I'm so glad that they were able to show it off when they did, and they had it at such a big event with so many eyes on it, because I feel like the game just wouldn't have done as well if it didn't have that spot.
Yep. All right. I'm sure we'll revisit our discussion about the presence or lack of presence that E3 has once E3 time rolls around and we feel the suspicious missing link of the summer. But for now, I want to move us on to talking about hype cycles and games news and game reveals especially. Because there's a couple of things I want to bring up from the last E3 that I think are interesting little things that we just haven't heard anything about, where I have to go, why was this announced? So, you all remember the little game that had a nice CG trailer. I believe it was by, I want to say Avalanche was doing it, the Just Cause guys. Good old little game by the name of Contraband. Does anybody remember this game?
I do.
No.
I do.
I'm impressed.
I don't know why, but I do.
It just had
I forget many important things in my life, but for some reason, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it is Avalanche Studios. A little trailer for Contraband. What is this game? Why? Why do we just get this trailer, the CG trailer, back in June of last year, and then just nothing? This to me is the question mark, right? And I think this is where I'm on Brett's side of, if you're revealing a game, show me the game, like at least a little bit. And if you're going to show
within
go ahead,
less than a year of it coming out, probably, like Nintendo tends to do most of the time.
I think the furthest I am willing to allow a CG trailer to go, right, is I think Redfall, the new Arcane project. That's the open world immersive sim
vampire
immersive sim
hunter one.
I think that is as far as you can push a CG trailer, because we didn't see actual gameplay, but I think we all have a decent idea of how the game will play from that trailer, right?
I do like the looks of that stake railgun.
Yeah, like we have a good handle on what that game likely is without the need to see real gameplay. I think that's okay. Contraband showing up and just doing this little throw on the ground briefcase with a bunch of bullets, I don't care. I'm out.
Yeah,
I don't know what's going on here. That to me is the limit.
That was at a Bethesda show, wasn't it?
Contraband, I think, was also the Xbox conference.
The way you're describing the CG,
Bethesda, last year the Bethesda and Xbox conferences were the same thing. So
the way you're describing this CG trailer, it just sounds like it's going to be Payday, but under a different name.
That sounds like it's going to be,
because you don't know.
Weird Just Cause again. I don't.
Yeah.
Say it's a co-op smuggler's paradise. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything to me. All right. I think if you are a sequel, you have a bit more leeway here, where you can do the Outer Worlds 2 thing, where, all right, we're just going to announce there's another Outer Worlds. It's for the same reason I don't have a problem with Bethesda doing the Elder Scrolls 6 like 5-second reveal, because people would not shut up asking, is there going to be an Elder Scrolls 6? And like, fine, here's 5 seconds for you to go make 3 years of video content off of while we make Starfield. Plan works perfectly. So I think in a sequel case, it's a much different thing. But then you come back to sequels of like Final Fantasy games. If I see a CG trailer for a Final Fantasy game, I don't know what's going on. Those games change every time.
Oh,
which is why
They
I really
like 30 times mid-development sometimes.
Final Fantasy 16 showed us gameplay. Now I don't know where that game is. I don't know what's going on with Square.
That's the thing for me, is because you have 15 of them. There's going to be a 16.
Yeah,
it's just a question of when. And I don't think it hasn't gotten delayed. It's just we've never got a date in the first place. So it's just we're waiting. We're in flux.
The heavy suspicion right now is that Forspoken's delay has delayed 16 just by association of them not wanting to release two.
Not overlap.
Creative team games at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. This is bugging me, and I hope it's just a quick aside. What was that? For lack of a better word. What was that Scrolls-like game? That wasn't an Elder Scrolls. Avowed, that's the one.
Yeah, the Obsidian Elder Scrolls style action.
Has there been any
RPG.
news on that lately?
That was an announcement trailer. So, Avowed to me is another one of those ones that sits in a weird spot where I think maybe they should have held off a little bit on it, especially because we know Elder Scrolls 6 is coming. I think Avowed needs to wow us on its next appearance to like justify
apparently
its existence.
Apparently it's still coming in 2022.
Good luck. There's no way. There's no way.
Maybe that
is wishful thinking.
We are early in 2022. We are just at the start of April. There is a habit.
Don't picture it coming, but
there is a habit of a lot of studios. They'll wait until E3 time to announce a game releasing in November. That's generally the kind of cycle that a lot of studios will follow. So I would not be surprised if Avowed is launching December, October, November, like that area of this year. I don't think it's going to launch any sooner than that. Absolutely not going to hear about it, and I would not be at all surprised if it's delayed until 2024. So we know nothing about this game. And Obsidian is working on so many things already. They got Grounded. They just came out with something else too. They're working on like 3 separate projects at the moment. I think they were confirmed to also be working on one that's not announced yet. So Obsidian is very busy.
Their team's been growing though, right? I still don't. That's gonna like say that
they have Xbox money behind them now, so they're
out
getting
sooner.
bigger.
But
There's also this weird, and I've been thinking about this in the back of my head, because you were talking about like, sequels can get away with not showing as much because we know what to expect. Which I've been going down this like mental rabbit hole of like, there's there's moments where even that doesn't really work, because sometimes a sequel can change so much where they're promising a lot for it to be really
that was the Final Fantasy example, right? Because you don't know what to expect from a Final Fantasy sequel.
The thing that stands out in my mind is Beyond Good and Evil 2, which first of all,
great example.
What's going on with that? Where's
gameplay
that?
of that game, and I don't know what that is.
Yeah, we've seen gameplay and we still don't know what it is. It looks so different from the first game. Just structure, gameplay, everything about it. And also, we just haven't heard anything from it in like 3 years.
I need to remind people, Beyond Good and Evil 2 launched a crowdsourced art program to get people's art into the game that are not developers, basically for free. So this is a weird one to look at, right?
I feel like I heard something where it's been officially said that it's in development hell.
I mean, it is, regardless of what they might say it is.
It has been for a really long time, because it was in development way before they announced it 5-6 years ago, and then it was shelved, and then they surprise brought it back, and now it's in development hell again.
Yeah.
Did we mention this was an Ubisoft game?
it's just such a weird case because the lead developer is now off the project, who was the most interested in like crying when he did it. Yeah, so
That's
the
not
big
good.
partnership they had was Beyond Good and Evil. Beyond Good and Evil partnered with something called Hit Record, which they would collect essentially artwork and assets from users, and they get like a commission essentially if they are chosen to be used. But they massively crowdfunded a bunch of assets to populate this world. Now, I don't call this out because I think it's a bad idea. I think there's a lot of legal gray area with this, especially asking artists to do art at the possibility of being paid. Maybe.
Yeah.
At the same time, like
that's dangling a carrot right there.
I do think there's plenty of like fan artists that would be doing this art anyway, and for them, it's not really, I think, a major thing. If you're a huge fan of Beyond Good and Evil and you're gonna make some art of it anyway, at least now you might get paid at some point for doing some art. It's interesting. I think it's the kind of thing that just really is a unique take on this that could become a cool thing in the future if a company were to do this a little bit more groundedly and like actually have this massive effort of getting a lot of creative people outside of the games industry to contribute to it. I think it would allow you to do a lot of stuff and populate a world in a very interesting way.
You know,
I was from legal landmines.
You know what else would make this a lot? You know what else would make this whole program a lot cooler? If the game actually came out.
We had any indication of the game being real? Now, I don't know if this still exists because I don't.
That was a neat CG trailer and all. Where game?
Yeah, I guess they used it because it does say payments paid to date $50,000. So they apparently Ubisoft has paid $50,000 to various artists for use of their assets in Beyond Good and Evil 2, whether or not that game ever releases. So it's just an interesting little tidbit, side tangent. I just want to see if the game's going to come out.
By the way, I'm reading an article right now that was published 9th of February this year that says it's still in pre-production.
Oh.
We've seen gameplay, though. That's not what you call pre-production.
I don't think we've seen gameplay, have we?
We have.
We have.
There's like a 10-minute gameplay trailer out for Beyond Good and Evil 2 from like 3 years ago.
Which confirms that whatever that gameplay trailer was, complete BS. Because if they're still in pre-production, that was some like Anthem reveal level like BS.
Yeah, or it's just straight up like Halo 2 reveal BS where that is not going to be what the game is like at all anymore. Not enough time has passed.
So we've gotten multiple gameplay trailers. We've gotten a gameplay trailer 3 years ago that's like 4 minutes long. We've got a 24-minute gameplay demo from 2019. Like just all sorts of weird levels of stuff that are being produced.
I remember that they did some sort of thing too where they were showing off the ships that you could fly around, and the game looked rough. It looked
this gameplay trailer I'm looking at now looks very rough. Now that I'm seeing it, because you can see none of the characters have shadows. So that's an immediate tell. They are rotating between a tiny UI on the bottom left of things. It's just I don't know how this game is going to release, but
you know what this makes me think too, because there's the whole thing of like, okay, this game was clearly released announced way too early, right? There are some examples. There's ones where that is less frustrating. And one that comes to mind to me is Witchfire. If anyone remembers Witchfire, which was it had one trailer. No, it had one trailer, and it was this really cool trailer where it looked like a walking simulator at first. I was like, oh, by the guys that brought you, I think it's Vanishing of Ethan Carter, right? And you were walking around. I was like, oh, it's a walking simulator. And then the guy pulls out this giant revolver and starts shooting people. I was like, oh, also by the studio that brought you like Bulletstorm and all this stuff. And it was this cool reveal. And that was like what, 2017?
I thought you were about to say years ago.
Years ago.
It was a while back.
We haven't heard anything outside of very brief, like very small development logs and them talking about like right. And people have been asking about it. They've released like 10-second clips of like gameplay of maybe it's someone like fanning a revolver or something. And all they said is like, listen, development's fine. We just have nothing to show off right now, so we're not even going to bother. Which is the right attitude to have for something like this.
Nice.
You have a
fine.
cool trailer with this fun little gimmick, this fun little switch, little surprise, and then you're like, we're still working on it. We'll announce something when we have something to announce. Bye bye.
Yeah, we do have a tentative date for it. We have a tentative date of an early access release in Q4 of this year.
Ooh.
So still no idea when
That's-
this game's actually going to come out, but
Multiple layers removed. That gives them a lot of
multiple layers
padding.
removed.
Yeah, in case something goes wrong.
What game was at a show recently where the release date was like 20 whatever or something? Do you
2020
remember
like
that, Ryan?
7 or something.
Oh,
No, they were like
they
2020.
literally said
Oh, literally
20
20 whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you
God,
remember
what
that?
was
It
that?
I do remember.
You know what I'm
this. I don't
talking
remember
about,
what game
right?
That was. It was at an
Which is-
E3 trailer or
Which is
some
both.
show.
It was probably like a Devolver Digital game or something, and it
I
was,
think it was,
like
yeah.
that's funny. That's funny and kind of self-aware, and also like we're giving ourselves the time that we need. It's coming out sometime within this century, which is both funny, but also again gives you that breathing room. You know?
Yeah, I don't remember what game this is, but I do know exactly what you're talking about. All right, so talking about those, we've gotten some of the in development games out of the way. I do want to refocus and look a little bit at Cyberpunk because we've talked about Keanu Reeves coming out. It's been a year, just about a little over a year since
The game
Cyberpunk
still hasn't come
released.
out yet.
The game still hasn't come out yet. It's been delayed yet again. I played it 5 minutes ago before the podcast, so.
How'd you get your hands on a copy?
Well,
Look,
he's played the pre-release version. The final game has not come out yet.
yeah, super buggy. I do think Cyberpunk, in a better universe, is both an example of how to perfectly advertise a game and how to horrifically advertise a game.
Yes.
Because Cyberpunk, I think, if that game had not set itself up with such lofty expectations, entirely their own fault, right? Like, this is not the fault of people
completely.
overhyping themselves. This is the fault of their trailers talking about a bunch of features that are not in the game, were never in the game, and they knew they couldn't do. Right? There's a whole slew of reasons as to why this was not done successfully. If they just hadn't mentioned those, people would still be super excited, and I think wouldn't have been disappointed in the game.
Yeah.
The hype train for Cyberpunk is really interesting, right? Because oftentimes when a game is being announced, it's got like a couple of like super hype filled trailers, and then the game comes out and it doesn't live up to expectations, right? And there's a lack of transparency there. The weird thing about Cyberpunk's hype train is that it had no transparency, but also a lot of transparency at the same time. It's very strange because it didn't. It didn't, because there was plenty of things where like, okay, this feature clearly not in the game. You talked about this thing like complex crowd AI not in the game, but there were also times where they're like, okay, like we're just going to make an announcement. Wall running is not going to be in the game, and they were very clear that there's just some features that we're taking out.
Yeah, I feel like it was the point where like you could tell all of the teasers would lie, but in dev Q&A things they tell the truth about what would actually be in there. Unless I'm mixing those two up.
I think
it's hard to tell.
Yeah, it's harder because dev Q&As are always risky. I think speaking as because all of us have probably been part of dev Q&As before on a smaller scale. When you're doing a dev Q&A, generally, unless it is a prepared Q&A, you don't know what they're asking you. So you might just have to come up with an answer on the spot. And in that case, you have to basically rely on a lot of intent things and be like, well, this is what we want to do and what we're planning to do. But if your game's in development, you don't know if it's going to work, right? Especially at a small scale. So I think with indies especially, that's just an unreliable thing. Like a perfect example is Star Wars Skywalker Saga, because they said people were pointing to an interview from 2019 about them talking about, oh yeah, we're going to have character creation, we're going to have all this stuff. They don't, because something clearly happened during development, and like I don't blame them for that, but doing that interview, you need to be careful what you say, because anything you do add on is essentially a promise that the dev team is now going to have to break to release the game, right?
Yeah.
So you really need to know kind of what your limitations are and make sure not to oversell people on a game. That's why a lot of the time, like, people will be asked if a game exists, right? Like, before Diablo 4 was announced, everyone was constantly asking, is Diablo 4 in development? The reason they don't tell you yes or no, even though the answer is yes, right? Everyone knows Diablo 4 is coming, is because there is always the chance that the project implodes at any given moment, right? So
Project imploding at Blizzard? Oh, what?
Oh, crazy.
That's insane.
I do think though that what you brought up, Wyatt, about that strange mixture of like things that appear to be very transparent versus things that end up not being in the game, it has that same like psychological effect with the audience as the way that in the Metal Gear Solid games Kojima will mix real historical events and then in the same cutscene on the next slide he'll have like a picture of a character from the game saying that
The
they were
Fox
part of
Die
like a real
virus.
scientific project. Exactly, yeah. And it's like it works for the game in a positive way because it's blending reality and fiction in a way that makes the fiction more like it heightens it to so it feels more real. And it also, the parts that are true, you probably didn't know that before. So now you know it affects your real life perception of like, oh man, those nukes sure are bad, gosh darn it.
And
But
then there's a giant whale
in
on fire somewhere.
in this example, it has the opposite effect because it all you have that appearance of transparency where the devs are willing to show you this isn't working out, this isn't working, this isn't working out. Why didn't they say this isn't working out about all those other things that weren't working out? Because they didn't, it feels like, well, okay, they didn't mention it as a thing that wasn't working out. It must be working.
Oh.
It must be in the
Yeah.
full game when it comes out.
Oh,
And when it's
yeah.
not, you have the meshing of fact and fiction in a very negative way that got people to believe a lot of things. It's so weird, and that's
why
those
nobody
like
can believe Peter Molyneux anymore, right? Peter Molyneux
Exactly, yeah.
ruined his reputation based on promising things that were not in the games or that were things that no one cared about. Yeah, okay, I can grow a tree in real time in Fable 1. Why? What is that gonna
Wow.
accomplish?
No thanks.
Like, that doesn't serve a purpose even to anyone.
Or oh wow.
There are some moments.
Virtual property.
I would love to
Uh.
have an animator do this bit where like Peter Molyneux walks on stage and starts making all these promises in Fable, and then all the devs back in the studio are like, "What are you talking about?"
Excuse me?
Dang.
Yep. And I have to wonder, is this gonna be the case with Starfield? Because I think Starfield is banking on the same thing right now, where Todd Howard is making promises because Starfield is his dream game, right? That is the game that he
What?
became. Yeah, Todd Howard has stated that Starfield
has
is
he
like the
said
game
about-
that he always wanted to make. It is the game that he wanted to develop when he was a kid, and like it's the thing that he wanted to create with his studio. So this is the passion project for him, and like
Right
I
now,
buy that, right?
I'm the only I'm not hoping or expecting for any types of mechanics or anything. I just want there to be the same amount of passion behind it as Morrowind.
But let me go into some detail about what they promised in the last like 25-minute developer interview. So they promised alternative starts that start you in different positions in the game world with different characters that you know and different life selections. So essentially, the way I take this is kind of I think you could take this as the Cyberpunk, like there's 3 different starts that you pick from that have more of an effect on the story. The way I kind of take it is more of the space sim route of it's just a starting point. It's not going to affect your like preconceived relationship with characters necessarily. It's just going to affect where you are in the universe at that point in time and like what your relationship status with people might be. So like, are you liked by this faction? Are you not liked by this faction?
Yeah.
But that then adds, okay, is this game going to have like reactive factions? Are we doing that? Because Bethesda hasn't really done that before. At least not in a way that has like actual gameplay sandbox reactivity, right? They've done story-based faction betrayal and whatnot, but not a system that is more sandboxy. So is that what we're getting? Or are we getting Skyrim in space, right? Because I wouldn't be disappointed at Skyrim in space. But if I'm getting Skyrim in space, I don't want to get my hopes up for something that isn't Skyrim in space, right?
If you're getting Skyrim in space, then someone is lying.
So
basically.
someone, as of the last thing, has said something bad, right?
Yes.
What they are saying is not the truth. So, is that what we're getting? Is it not what we're getting? Is the game gonna come out this year? All valid questions.
Find out next time.
The reason it's so confusing with Bethesda especially is they do not show gameplay of their games until they are ready to release, right?
Yeah.
They tend to hold that gameplay trailer back until about 3 months before the release date. So if that's what they're
Let's
doing,
play a
I'm all
game.
in, right? I would love to see a
Two
big
truths.
blowout for Starfield. But at the same time, Fallout 76 was their last game. Fallout 76 is one of the worst things that I have ever played. Not because it's actually bad, but because I don't remember anything that happened.
I can confer. I was there with him.
We
It
played
was
this
one of
game
the
for
worst
like
things.
3 hours. And I have
Nothing happened.
no memory of
It was
anything.
it's the equivalent of watching paint dry, and that's such an overused comparison. But I've never ever felt like I was actually watching paint dry my entire life until I played that game. Like I can't think of another game that personifies that comparison more in my
Now,
head.
do
I
you have
can't.
Control? Have you ever watched actual paint
And
dry?
Wyatt, I have played games where I literally watch paint dry. That sounds like a
And
joke.
it was more interesting.
It's not. I just played Such Art yesterday, which is a game where you can sit and watch paint dry, and it was far more interesting.
You can watch a tree grow in real time in Fable 1. Wow!
But can I watch a tree go in real time on Exegol and the new Starfield Star Wars DLC? I don't know.
You can watch Peter Molyneux walk up on a stage and pull random BS out of his ass. That's
In
probably
real
more
time.
interesting.
And look, I also think, Wyatt, you've got a personal bit of experience with this disappointment now, because you had assumed that Star Wars Lego, the Skywalker Saga, would have online co-op. The developers at no point said the game would have online co-op, and now you know the disappointment of feeling like you were lied to.
Feeling like you were lied to.
I mean, listen. Listen, I was in the Cyberpunk hype train. I know what it's like to be lied to, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it is important to qualify
Yeah,
Cyberpunk with a
same
statement
here,
that
Wyatt.
at least I think Wyatt and I were pretty happy with Cyberpunk when we played it, right?
I stand by the fact that underneath all of the controversy and the way it was released, it's a damn good
With the
video
major
game.
qualifiers
love
that we
the
played it on
story.
PC and had almost no bugs, right?
I-
That's the big
Yes.
caveat.
I, on the
Yes.
other hand, played it on PS4
Mhm.
Pro. It only ever crashed without what I thought was a reason twice. I thought
You
the
had like
story
tons of frame
was,
rate issues. You had like crowd issues happening.
Yeah.
You got the
Well,
gamut of bugs, didn't you?
I didn't really mind there not being huge crowds. I wasn't.
You
that,
hadn't like hyped yourself up for the GTA style
Yeah.
world, right? 'Cause
No.
that was the thing a lot of
No.
people got in their heads, that it was going to
No,
be. Which it
the
wasn't.
main thing I was counting on was the story being good, and it is.
Mhm.
But the one like big disappointment for me is that I on the PS4 Pro, which essentially is just the same as the PS4 as far as issues that have been reported, I can't enter Center City.
Yep.
I cannot enter that district. It will the game will immediately crash upon me crossing a loading border.
Why would you need to?
For
What's why?
I
It's not like it's important.
I honestly, well, no, I don't know, because there's not really a story beat that happens in the center city.
Yeah, but you have to pass through there at some points to get to
Yeah.
the next area, so you can't really avoid
Yeah,
it.
and there's one handler named Dino or something that you can buy a shitty car from. So I didn't really feel like I was missing too much, I guess.
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm able to finish the story.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? On top of that too, there's really, because I'm looking at like just different examples of like how this game was like announced versus how it came out and the hype that came out in between. One that keeps popping back into my head as another unique case is Sea of Thieves. So, because I've been replaying Sea of Thieves recently. Sea of Thieves came out, and at launch it was a disappointment for everyone, right? But here's the thing: it wasn't a disappointment because Rare made a lot of promises that they didn't deliver on. Anytime that they would talk about the game, anytime they showed gameplay of it, it is exactly what you could do in the release version, right? There just wasn't much there to begin with, and that's why people were disappointed. It's not that they said things that they eventually didn't like put in. It's just that's the game.
There's also this like
it was really strange.
I like that you've brought up a pirate game, because pirate games are in a unique situation where I think everyone knows the pirate game they want. It's Assassin's Creed Black Flag with Sid Meier's pirates. It's just that. Literally, you don't need to change any mechanics. But those two games, just smash them together. You got a perfect pirate game, and yet nobody has even attempted it.
with one mechanic addition though. I'd like the insult battles from Monkey Island.
Oh, of course, of course. See, I
Very
think
important.
that's the qualifier with all these pirate games that keep coming out and failing. Not Sea of Thieves hasn't failed, but Skull and Bones absolutely has failed. Before it releases, that game has failed because they've refocused it like 6 times to be either multiplayer or single player, and it's going to release as a mess. That is what that game is going to be. I will stand by that statement until hopefully I'm proven wrong and we get a good pirate game. But
I'll say this. Sea of Thieves is the pirate game of your dreams from a multiplayer perspective, not a single player perspective, because I feel like a lot of people are still waiting for that. From a multiplayer perspective,
it's missing the trade. It's missing the dancing mini game. It's missing the bit where I could marry someone's daughter and then go take over their merchant empire and then run off laughing into the sunset and then go murder my father's killer. Right? It's missing that. That's what people want. Right? That is the thing that makes the perfect pirate game, is that jank level of sandbox where you get to create this like a crazy sandbox. Imagine Watch Dogs Legion, but it's pirates. Perfect game.
If I could have a My Name is Inigo Montoya moment in a pirate game, I'd never play another game in my life.
It's why every terrible pirate game sells so well. Right? There's like 10 terrible pirate games on Steam that have all sold extremely well because there is nothing else. So,
was that one Atlas made by the Ark Survival Evolved,
which just doesn't run? That game is just
oh no.
I've heard the game's concept and like the gameplay is good. It just is so poorly optimized that you can't run it on most hardware at all. So,
and while we're talking about Sea of Thieves, I think another interesting point of discussion is a game that comes out disappointing everyone, but then has that awesome redemption arc after the fact. And I think if you're in that realm, you can't not talk about No Man's Sky because wow. I mean, probably one of the greatest redemption arcs of any game ever.
And it's still going.
Everybody likes games so much more than me.
Yeah. It's it's an interesting discussion now because it's like so many promises that were just never made when that game came out. So much excitement, and now it's at a point where I think people are more than satisfied with how the game is right now, and the fact that they're still coming out with like update after update. And the question arises now: it's like, do we forgive Hello Games for the hype cycle leading up to its release and how it launched? Like, is what they've done
again?
If what they've done in the past, however, was it 2017?
Yeah.
So 5 years, right? Do we forgive them now? And
I believe we won't be able to tell until they come out with a new game, and we see what
they have
cycle for that.
They came out with
Last Campfire,
which released
and it was very good.
Was very good and was very small and not overscoped. So I'd
say forgive them.
They've learned.
Absolutely. Perfect. Storybook ending.
And that's the amazing thing. They came out with a second game that didn't interrupt content for No Man's Sky, because they are still...
And No Man's Sky is still their flagship. Absolutely.
Yeah. They're still trucking along with updates like
in fact,
no
I would
business.
hazard most people would be willing to start paying for DLC for No Man's Sky if they were to release like an expansion pack, right?
I have a feeling... pay for the updates?
No, you don't. They're all free. Everything in No Man's Sky is free.
There hasn't been a single piece of paid content post-launch.
It's telling me
insane.
A game that is almost live service with the amount of updates that it has, I only have to pay for
nickel and
once.
Dime you? Oh, incredible!
By the gods!
It's to such a degree that I'm just like, Hello Games, release in a year, come out with a $20 DLC that's like themed around maybe making the space combat better or something. Instantly, I'll buy that, right? Because you've gotten that trust back and you've built a product that I think is excellent. Great example of this. We have the perfect example of forgiving a company. Final Fantasy XIV launched and was the worst trash fire of an MMO that I've ever played. It was really bad. It wasn't good. There was no reason to play it. You couldn't play it with mouse and keyboard on a PC because why would you want to?
What?
Yeah, original Final Fantasy 14, you could not play with mouse and keyboard on a PC, and you had to like use the D-pad to scroll between abilities. Awful.
Oh,
Awful.
Yeah, but Ryan,
awful.
back when that
Disgusting.
game, yeah, but Ryan, back when that game came out, you couldn't play. There were no keyboard and mice. Those didn't exist when that game came out.
Back in
It's not their
2014.
fault. It's not their fault.
Look, I think that's the key example of a studio fixing it, because Final Fantasy 14 is now the MMO that I would say has the best reputation by a significant degree.
Oh yeah,
Um,
100%.
and not necessarily due to like their own successes, but just because the rest of the market is not doing so hot. Maybe ESO is doing fine, but like there's more failures than there are successes, and generally the failures are really high profile. So basically all it takes to make a good advertising cycle now is just don't lie to your player base, and you're probably going to get a lot of respect.
It's shameful that that's become the bar.
Yeah. Or if you do, you better make up for it and put in the work like Hello
Yeah.
Games did. And I would argue to a lesser extent Rare has also done the same thing. If you play
Hello
Sea of Thieves
Games
now compared to Launch.
Hello Games and Rare,
Very
I think, are both in the similar situation of having financial backing that made it possible for them to recover, right? Where Hello Games had the Sony advertising budget that was originally given to them, and they had enough, presumably, in the bank left after that to devote some time to fixing the game, and they realized, okay, if we fix the game, it's going to spread by word of mouth, and people are going to buy it because it's really good now. Sea of Thieves has the benefit of Game Pass, where I think Sea of Thieves could do whatever they want now, and they're not going to fail because people are still going to play a pirate game on Game Pass, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what they do. I want to play a pirate game on Game Pass. Is good deal. So, I don't know. I think we've hit this weird point where games can officially become too big to fail. It's probably why Marvel's Avengers is still kicking around back there in the dirt.
It's why Call of Duty is still around. Too big to fail.
I will see. That situation stands to change within the next year or so.
That's true.
So
That's true.
I assume Call of Duty as an IP is too big to fail, but studios that make it, I'd certainly be different. So yeah, we're in an interesting case right now where a lot of studios are being acquired, a lot of things are changing about the gaming landscape. So it'll be interesting to revisit this discussion in a year or two, I think, when things have become different, presumably. So, all right.
We didn't even get to talk about early access at all, which is a whole.
That's what I was about to bring us to, Wyatt. Because as we mentioned, Wishfire is coming to early access. And
Yes,
I have to bring up a couple of early access success stories, I think, to start us off the early access discussion in a way that is productive.
I know where this is going.
Because we all know early access is the vast majority of failures. But there are some big success stories. And Wyatt, I know you think you know where this is going, but you don't, because I'm going to bring up a little game.
Is it not?
Is it not what?
Is it not going there?
It's not going there. I'm going to bring up a little game called Necess. So Necess is a little game. It's like maybe less than $10 in early access right now. It is a Terraria-inspired mining game that has been in early access for a couple of years, made by one developer that is the best Terraria-like game I've ever played. This game is tiny, clearly a passion project. It is minuscule budget, you can tell by the way it's done, and it has less than 400 reviews total in Steam right now. But it's consistently getting updates like every week for years. And this game is now what I would consider one of the more polished full releases that I've played, and yet it's still in early access because the developer just doing it. They're just going at it. They're just going ham. So I think that's really where early access has started to shine, is the smaller indie development teams that get enough to sustain a project from it, and they can make this really unique small thing that has the mechanics of Terraria, except it's top down, and there's town building, and you can have a colony, and you can tell everyone to farm for you, and it's actually Animal Crossing at the same time. Crazy, right? Another example, Warsim. Warsim is a $3 text-only adventure game that has the most content out of any RPG I've ever seen, because all of it's ASCII art. Very simple, but it's a super fun little example game, I think, that is getting updates, I think, more than once a week. It's like getting 2 updates a week at this point because it's all text, so the developer can pump out a crazy amount of stuff, and it's $3.
So interesting. That's
It's really,
so
really
interesting.
cool. So that to me is like the big star of early access, is these weird little projects that just barely are succeeding and skating by on the minuscule profit they're probably making because they have small development teams. I think those are the most interesting. But Wyatt, why don't you take this discussion to where I knew you wanted me to take it?
I'd love to. So, because I completely agree with you. I think there's a lot of smaller, completely weird, out there indie games that wouldn't get the attention otherwise that they, that they deserve. Sometimes you have a studio that I'm not going to say is AAA at all. This is still a modestly budgeted studio, but oftentimes what you get as a benefit of early access is you get polish. You get polished to a point where you look at the game and it's so polished, it's so shiny that it blinds you. And that game is Hades. I'm going to talk about Hades again because oh my god, I love Hades, as you all know. And that's a game where you can, when you're playing it, because I wasn't part of the early access group for Hades, because I didn't really know what it was back in the day. I was like, okay,
It's also
another...
exclusive. The early access for Hades was exclusive to the Epic Game Store, of all things.
Yes.
Yes, it was.
So one of the first titles to launch exclusive to Epic Game Store.
Weird.
And the only title that I bought on the Epic Game Store for like the first year of its existence. Picked up Hades as soon as it was announced.
I knew that it was a Supergiant game, and at the time I had played a bit of Bastion and that was it, and I was like, well, it's a Supergiant game, so it's probably going to be really good whenever it comes out. But if you're like me, you weren't part of the early access train, and you just play it at release, you can tell that there was so much work that went into just polish and just making it so like fully featured and having every system work.
Hades had a really different approach to early access than a lot of studios, where the way Supergiant handled it was development updates to the game. Actually, there is another studio that doesn't like this, and I'll talk about it in a minute. But Hades, when updates were pushed, were very polished, very complete, and you generally had, like, when an update was there, you had a new avenue of content that was fully ready. Like, it was near ready for release. Maybe some numbers needed to be balanced or something, but voice acting was there, art was there generally, and if it wasn't like brand new art, they had like this really cool process of creating temporary art that looked professional enough to be real art. That was really interesting, where they had a bunch of base like model types they would use. So a lot of interesting stuff with the development cycle of that, where it was really hard to tell that it was an in-development game until you hit the end of it. We're like, oh, there's not more game here.
Right.
It was really interesting.
Right. And of course, while we are talking about early access, you also have to mention Deep Rock Galactic, which I think also used its early access development in a very, very efficient way, in a very positive way. Because I remember, like, when gameplay was first coming out for it, and it was a completely different looking game. A completely different, just gameplay wise as well, and it really came into its own thing. And again, if you play the game, you can tell that it's had constant community feedback, and it's been through so many like sprints of just pure polish. And again, you can tell in the end product, the game looks great, it runs really well on almost anything, and it's just gameplay is super smooth. And even though there's a lot of RNG, randomly generated elements to it, everything seems to work well together. And I feel like it couldn't have achieved what it did if it wasn't constantly working with its community that was really passionate about the game.
Yeah. The other studio I was going to bring up is Larian. Larian has had Divinity Original Sin 2, was developed mostly in early access, and the way they handled it is they actually didn't put the majority of the game in early access. They would put new mechanics in the first third of the game for people to test in early access under the Act 1 like area. That's where you got to test everything and where all the fun stuff was, and you could play that entire area through with all the crazy quests, and they just never actually put the other like 2/3 of the game in early access so that people had like that release thing when the game released and it was all really good. You had to actually experience all that and see all this new content without anything getting like spoiled, especially it being a story heavy game. You would have this limited area That's currently what they're doing with Baldur's Gate 3, which I don't think we have a tentative release date for. It might have been late this year, early next year at the current moment, but we still don't have a decisive release date for that. It's also going through that same process where you can play the first like third-ish, probably less, of the game and get to experience that portion of it, and then they're going to do like a final rebalance and then release the rest of it. So you have like this big surprising release, which I think for a lot of studios is super risky because you don't get to test 2/3 of your game with that audience, right? But with Larian, I think they have enough money to hire testers to test that bit, right? They're using mostly early access to determine player feedback for, okay, how do abilities work? And is this fun? Do we need to change how something like attacks of opportunity work? Is there a class that doesn't work the way you would want it to? Which has been happening a lot with Baldur's Gate 3 because it's an adaptation of a current D&D rule set. So they're like, okay, how do we adapt this into a video game? And I've been taking a lot of feedback on that. So I think that's a really interesting way of approaching it.
It's a early access in general is it's a very different way of building up hype, I feel like, because it's something where it doesn't just drop and then surprise everyone and then there's just a ton of hype as soon as it's revealed. It's something that builds up over time. It's the snowball effect of like, okay, this is pushed out onto Steam. It's this little maybe unknown early access indie game, and then it just spreads through word of mouth, right? And if they keep coming out with updates and improving it and people are seeing that their voices are being heard in terms of, you know, what the direction of the game should be, it gets more and more positive attention, and then it just, again, it snowballs, and then by the time the game is ready to come out, there's already so much positive press around it for the right reasons, rather than just, oh, this came in out of nowhere and we're excited for it.
Or the game fails, which has happened. Not to paint early access as a perfect thing, it definitely isn't. And the majority of early access titles fail and are abandoned. So
especially in the early days, and even it was worse when early access first started becoming a thing, but it is still a problem to this day that a lot of games come out purposefully unfinished and call it early access, so, you know, not as much work can be put into it and they can just take their money and run. It's something that still happens today, and it's still a huge gamble. It is.
Battlefield.
Well, now companies can do that today, and they don't even have to call it early access anymore. DICE could just drop Battlefield 2042, and it's like 25% of the game, and they can just make money off of it.
It's just there.
It's just fine.
That's what you get.
It's just there.
Yeah, I don't know how true that is, because I do think I just decided when you said that, let's open up the early access page on Steam and see what releases we have. A lot of rough-looking tower defense games. A game called Seal World, which is $2 and is about a bubble.
A bubble.
Yeah, a bubble. You
Not
got
the
a lot of
military
things
or
in
the
here
animal.
that I think are simultaneously rough-looking, and some of them definitely look like passion projects that looking at them, have a feeling will fail. Because you kind of, I think a lot of people that are in game development develop a sense for that when they're looking at things, and they can be like, all right, this is not going to hit mass market. It might be a really good idea. It's not going to hit mass market just because you can't rely on selling a game for $2 and have a tiny audience and making enough money for your game to succeed. Unless you're Warsim, unless you're a text-based adventure game that for some reason has far more people interested in it than it should. Sometimes you can break out of that, but a lot of these games are definitely not going to succeed, at least in the early point. It's just like the sad reality of game development.
Yeah.
All right. Unless anyone has anything to add on that somber note. We got a podcast done. Is that time of the podcast where we go, hey, it's over, go do something else and wait till next week. That's the show. Shoutouts time. So
Shout out time.
What was that, Brett? What's your shout out?
I said shout out time. I can go first, though.
You're going first now because you said shout out first. So
well, my shout out goes to, and this is a wrestling related thing, so I'm sorry to you other two, but shout out goes
Don't
to
be sorry.
Listen, he's been out for a while. People didn't know which company he was gonna go to. People said maybe he's gonna stop. There's rumors he's gonna go here, rumors he's gonna go there. And this WrestleMania
Adrenaline
weekend,
in my soul?
No. Samoa Joe, baby, is all elite. Let's go.
The cereal man is back.
He's back. He's so mad. He came out and people exploded. The audience of like 300 people looked bigger than the reaction of whoever the heck that other guy was in the audience with like 10,000 people. That's what it looked like to me. I don't know if you disagree with that, Ryan. I don't know.
Can't wait to pour myself a nice milky bowl of Samoa Joe's.
We'll confirm. I did go back and watch the Cody reaction. I think a lot of it is just WWE has weird mixing on their streams.
Probably that.
He did get a huge pop looking at clips afterwards. So I think a lot of people were happy to see him. But Samoa Joe, I mean,
Samoa Joe.
Of the two, I will take Samoa Joe.
Yes.
Happily take my cereal man. So
the robot arm.
I'm gonna steal the next shout out because I want to shout out before I forget. People found today a prototype of a Gex sequel called Gex Junior.
Found?
A playable
What do you mean
prototype.
found?
They found a disc for it somewhere, ripped it out, and there is now a playable Gex Junior prototype that you can find for the PSX. It looks just as jank as you would expect, and I love it. I just love that the saga of Gex keeps giving.
Good.
Who wants to go next? Alex, Wyatt.
I'll go. Shout out to Deep Rock. I've been talking about this in general. Shout out to Deep Rock Galactic and their introduction to Battle Pass and seasonal content, and the way that they've been very pro-consumer. You don't have to pay for a single dime, and it's a great, easy system where no stupid Halo Infinite style challenges that are very weird and specific and randomized. Progression feels like it's at a good pace. Again, everything is free. It's tons of new content. It's fantastic.
Take us home, Alex.
It's me. Time to dox myself again. I was out walking Benny today, and I kind of happened upon, I knew it was going on, to the yearly Maple Sugar Festival that I live down the street from. Is very
Excellent.
It's a very fun happening.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
I got to have free locally made maple syrup, not even from a bottle, straight from a bucket, poured onto some vanilla ice cream for free.
That sounds
and then
like a
I
good
went and
day.
bought some maple candies.
Solid day.
And there were
Sounds
cool
like
exhibits of this is the process of tapping in the tree, drilling. There was a little documentary that they brought up.
Just love if you could do that again
Things
for me,
like that.
Alex. Just so I can play us out on that. Great. So on that note, podcast airs Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Time on the podcast platform of your choice. We're going to be doing some Gang Beasts soon. Wyatt and I are still playing Tiny Tina's Wonderlands and streaming that. So you can catch us on a variety of places right now. As always, we'll see you next week.
In shock. Did you not realize what you were... You didn't know.